Welcome to Fearless Females, where ambition meets resilience. Meet your guide, Lorie Jones, president of Fidelis Wealth Advisors. Join her and remarkable women executives as they uncover the triumphs and transformative moments shaping extraordinary careers. Ready to be fearless? Let the journey begin.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us again on Fearless Females. I'm Lorie Jones. I really appreciate Fidelis Wealth Advisors for sponsoring this. We could not do it without them. So today I am chatting with Savannah. And the thing that I appreciate most about Savannah is just that she is so passionate about helping women go into her field. She wants to support, help, answer questions, do anything she can to get them excited and interested. She's talking about trying to do scholarships or anything to help support and grow women in her field. And I love that kind of passion. I think it's so important. She works in industrials. Now, I will admit, and I'm a little embarrassed to admit this, but I asked her about what she did and she explained it to me. And we talked for almost an hour about the different things that she does. And I still don't know exactly what she does. So if you're interested after the episode is over, she gives you some contact information. Just reach out to her. She's super nice and really eager to help, but I find it fascinating. So let's get started. Good morning. So thank you for joining us today. We are here with Savannah Rose. She's an entrepreneur and business owner in several different areas. And thank you so much today for joining us today, Savannah. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
So the thing I'm most excited about is just to hear your story about working in definitely a male-dominated industry. But I always like to start out with the question of, I'm a reader and I love all different kinds of books. What's your favorite book?
Okay, I love this question so much because I have actually been thinking about this a lot lately. And the book that I would say my favorite book and probably the most profound read is East of Eden by John Steinbeck. And I am totally enthralled with him. I think he is an excellent novelist. And, he wrote Of Mice and Men and Grapes of Wrath. And so he highlights the struggles of the disenfranchised. And I think that is so interesting because he represents the working class people.
And there's a lot of parallels, too, between what we're dealing with even so many years later and what he was writing about.
Right. With the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression. And the way that he paints these scenic views, it's almost like it feels like, you can feel the dust on your skin and it just feels like you're there. He's so descriptive.
Yeah, I love that one too. So we're in agreement there. So tell us a little bit about your journey, Savannah. How did you get where you're at and what do you do today? Talk to us just a little bit about that.
Yeah, of course. So initially I entered this industry around 2018 and I started off doing containment sales for a spill containment company. They specialize in the spill containment, so berms for frac tanks, roll-off boxes, that sort of thing. And it was actually a friend's older sister that interviewed me. She wanted to know if I'd be interested in outside sales. And so I started as an outside sales rep with her, toured kind of all over the Gulf South area, went to an abundance of networking events. And then this was when I'm from Baton Rouge. So this is when I lived in Baton Rouge. And then once I had moved to Beaumont, I ended up getting a job at a local equipment rental place that actually rented out these giant mats, which is relevant shortly. So I worked there for a little bit and then, a couple years, and then the whole COVID thing happened. And so probably the worst time to start up a business, but it did give me a lot of time to focus, time at home to focus and really dive into what I wanted to do, to think about it. I knew I wanted to stay in industrial sales, but I wasn't really sure what the product line was initially. I got to slinging these mats and I was like, I could really just focus on the access roads, the erosion control, the things that I already have been selling. So that's kind of what I opened the business in 2021, Midstream Mats and Rentals. And so we provide the access matting and ground protection for the Golden Triangle area, which is, Port Arthur, Beaumont, Orange. And so, yeah.
So did you have education? Like, how did you decide you wanted to work in this industry? Did you go to college? You're like, well, heck, that sounds like fun.
I did go to college, but I did not use my degree for anything industry related at all. Sometimes I don't necessarily have regrets about going to college. I just wish that I knew at the time that this was going to be this is what I was going to end up doing. So maybe I would have either chosen a more relevant background or maybe went to a technical college. I would really like to see more people consider that option as well. But it really just started from an entry-level outside sales rep. And then I kind of worked my way up. And, at the company over here in Beaumont, where I had initially started when I moved to Texas, I learned so much. I was promoted to a general manager. I learned so much about, leadership and how to speak to employees empathetically and things like that, which kind of helped me transition over to a business owner. I would say that the toughest part of getting all of this together was really the capital and a plan. But believe it or not, I consider it pretty easy to get the hang of. And like I tell people, it's not that it's difficult. It's just that you've never done it before.
Yeah, I agree. And that's the message I send with finance as well. A lot of people have that as you're opening your business and you've got your, business plan and stuff like that. It's the same with finance. You just haven't done it yet. It's not too complicated. You can figure this out. It's just you haven't quite done it yet.
And I imagine that finance is an intimidating area as well. So
yeah. So what did you like the best when you started on that outside sales job that you're like, oh yeah, this is my calling. I definitely want to be in this arena and stay in this arena because it's pretty male dominated.
Right. So, okay, well, there's two aspects to that because to be in sales in the first place, you have to be a special kind of person, I feel. You have to be resilient. And I was not always that way, but I have learned to be resilient. I bounce back when I'm told no. That's so important because so many people get discouraged by the word no, but they say the work you put in today will benefit you 6 months down the road. But I would say the thing that I think has been most rewarding has really just been advocating for other women. I've had resources there for me that might not necessarily be available to them and vice versa. And so I really want to make an easier pathway for other women. They can learn from my mistakes. I'm 32 years old. Maybe the next person won't take as much time.
They can learn from the mistakes that I made on my way through here and know what not to do in the first place, right?
Right.
That's great. So if you could look back, Savannah, and say, I'm so glad I made this investment in myself. Like I did this thing and it's so pivotal to the successful person that I am today. Is there something you can point to or think about that would?
Yes, for sure. I think that self-education and self-awareness are so important and underrated, really. I mean, learning and gaining a more comprehensive understanding of financial statements and tax returns. If you don't have a financial background, it is going to take time to learn these things. You have to be patient. And I would say just really educating yourself, even with your accountant, being involved in the decision-making and really understanding how some of these things might affect the business, especially when it comes to the way that you file your taxes, because that was a hard lesson to learn between filing as a single member LLC or filing as an S corp. So that's been one thing, but I would say another great investment is networking is probably the single most important thing about this job. So if you are an extroverted person, that networking is your thing, and I read a quote the other day on Facebook, I think, that said, networking will take you places that your degree never will. And I do agree with that in a lot of ways. I think meeting the right people and under the right circumstances, that certainly benefit you down the road.
So did you figure out networking trial and error, or was there something deliberate you did or a book you read? How did you get to that place?
Well, networking began due to, they have a lot of these industry specific, especially in the industrial industry, a lot of these mixers, the Houston Pipeliners events, the Pipeliners events all over, really. And then, of course, any kind of opportunity that supports women. They have the Women's Pipeliner Network in Houston that is phenomenal. They're very supportive of women. And I've attended many of those events where they'll have hundreds of people there to chat with. And if you're not meeting somebody that is necessarily beneficial to you in the procurement aspect, you're still meeting somebody that knows somebody that, I've had people refer their customers to me. But really, you can kind of look up for your area and see what's available. We have golf tournaments all the time, cook-offs all the time, things like that.
So kind of industry specific, looking for groups that are supportive or that are like intertwined in that industry and then showing up.
Right. And sometimes you have to go before you know whether or not it was valuable. And because I'd be lying if I said that every event that I've gone to has been valuable. I think that it's worth a shot. If you continue to go to that event and you're not getting anything out of it, then, your time is probably more useful elsewhere. But a lot of times you won't know until you try.
Yeah. So show up maybe a couple of times.
Yeah. Or, just make sure it's relevant to knowing your customer base is very important. So you can make sure that you're attending the relevant events, that I'm attending the pre-construction kind of. I work with a lot of contractors, so reverse trade shows and that kind of thing. The Chamber of Commerce does events over here. They're very heavily involved in supporting the industrial industry as well as women in the industrial industry.
I like that you pointed out too that there are very supportive women's groups, especially in industries that are male dominated. It feels like women are trying to help those that are coming into the industry. They want to encourage more women in whatever industry they're in.
Yeah, so, a warm welcome is always great. I had so many helpful women that came into my life when I first started this journey. And I really don't think I could have done it without them. With the constant encouragement, I feel, you're always trying to prove your competence. I feel like I'm always like overcompensating to show people that I'm a competent person when I need to be more. Other women have encouraged me to do this, is to be more secure in myself. So I know myself. I know what I'm capable of. I can do this. I will be taken seriously. It's really just due to the prevailing gender stereotypes in male-dominated industries.
So, Savannah, do you have a sense of what the percentage is of women in your industry, just out of curiosity?
I don't have the percentage for women in the industrial industry because it's so large and encompasses so many different things. But the general statistics on women-owned businesses, I do know that as of 2024, that the United States is home to more than 14 million women-owned businesses. And I believe that they generate somewhere north of 2.5 trillion in revenue. So right now, women-owned businesses constitute for 39% of the businesses in America. However, if I remember correctly, I believe they only account for 5% of the revenue. So obviously, that's going to be a disparity right there that needs, that's a gap that needs to be filled for women.
Yeah. And going back to what you said about learning finance, learning how to look at a business and a balance sheet and some of the financial statements to kind of increase, revenue in the bottom line and knowing some of those financial concepts, that's pretty key in that area.
Right. And outsourcing as well. That's another thing that women, not just women, but people in general, that they don't consider. You don't have to hire somebody in-house to do something that, if you can't do it, but it really doesn't make sense to hire somebody, consider outsourcing. There's so many programs out there that are available to utilize bookkeepers or, marketing companies, people that'll do your websites. I've hired somebody from another country to do my website over the internet. They did it. They can couple $100, but it's not anything fancy, but they spit it out or they do your marketing material, but I only hired them for that one thing. So outsourcing is so important, I feel, as well, especially because your capital is critical.
Yeah. Yeah. I say that a lot of the times. I am like, you are making your widget or providing your service, whatever it is you're doing, and that's your job. You don't need to know how to market and do finance and you need to have a little bit of understanding, but you don't need to do it all yourself. It turns you into a sleep deprived zombie.
Oh, I know. And that's definitely something that in the way beginning, I kind of negated the work-life balance because I was like, if I just keep working, if I just work harder, but self-care is so important to your mental health as well as your performance. I don't feel like it's necessarily easy to pour somebody else's glass when you're depleted,
Yeah, when you're running on fumes. I agree. And I've heard that over and over as well. So, Savannah, has anyone ever given you really bad advice, say the worst advice? And if they did you listen or did you go a different direction? Tell me about that.
Okay, so I definitely think that some of the worst advice, I don't know if it was necessarily said to me in this manner, but definitely implied, is the illusion of working yourself into the dirt, basically, which is kind of what we just touched on. Self-care is important and burnout is real. You really have to, a balanced work life is essential to your health and happiness, basically. You don't need to work harder to be taken seriously, because I feel like that's suggesting that women must put in extra effort to earn respect. So not only reinforces the idea of inherent inequality, but it leads to burnout.
You don't have to put in double the time, double the effort, double the work to be considered just as good.
Right. And I think that that's silly, as well as people try to persuade you to stay away from female-centric issues and just focus on the business. Well, that undermines the importance of addressing the gender disparities and an inclusive work environment in the first place.
Yeah, I found a lot in both these interviews and in my, my day-to-day profession, just that you do have to adjust working environment to be more inclusive if you want to get these minorities into the workforce. And then they bring a fresh perspective that makes a difference in what you're doing.
Right. I totally agree. Just engaging in the conversations about diversity and inclusion can kind of be pivotal in driving positive change for male-dominated industries, especially the one I am, is so vastly male-dominated. So there are women, not so much in ownership positions. They're out there, but I just really want to let other females know that there is an option for you to have a business of your own, and there are set asides and things in place that are there for your growth and career advancement.
And it sounds like a supportive network of women that's willing to help and lift as well.
Absolutely.
So if you had to look back on a situation that maybe you regret a little bit or you didn't handle quite the way that you wish you would have handled, is there a situation that you can think of that if you could go back knowing what you know now, you would do it differently?
Yes. I wish there's a particular circumstance when I first started this business where I dropped my rates significantly to retain a customer. And I really had put myself in a bind because though the rate was doable, I could have held my rate and found a customer who was willing to pay that rate. I already knew that I was inexpensive, but I tried to make myself available as the most inexpensive. And I think that was just a really short-sighted thing at the time. I really cheated myself out of the value that I feel that I provide. So that's been one of those things I look back on. And, I guess I did a good thing for that particular customer. However, I do wish that I would have put more emphasis on my own value.
Yeah, know your worth, right? How much you're worth, and let that be known. So did you what did it teach you? What did the situation teach you that you took out of that?
It really taught me that how you see yourself is the relationship you have with yourself is the relationship that you have with other people. You have to believe in yourself. You have to, there's not going to be, not every day are you going to be the most confident person, but if you don't know your own value, what is somebody else going to tell you? So that's kind of the biggest thing for me, is to be confident, to know that I know this stuff. And that goes back to the self-education and just having accountability in your professional journey.
They talk about imposter syndrome sometimes, where you just don't feel like you don't know it all. And it feels hard sometimes to be confident when you're feeling that doubt yourself. Is there a way that you overcame that?
Okay, so really just repetition starts to matter less when people tell you no, when you've heard it a million times. And when you realize that it's a job. At the end of the day, it's a job. Okay. So you don't just walk in somewhere and get your customer on the first day. There is some persuading that has to go into that. I used to be so scared of hearing no that I would try to write these really elaborate emails, very, as not necessarily emotionally driven, but trying to almost have like a profound meaning to them or something. And it's like, come on, people read the first sentence, and then that's it. They're not looking into it like that. You're gonna hear no a lot, and just it happens to everybody.
Learn from it, I guess, and try better next time. I'm still learning that lesson though, Savannah. I gotta tell you, it's still hard for me to hear no.
Oh yeah, no, and I totally agree. I do. It's easy to sit here and to say all this, but of course, when you hear no, it's never a good feeling, especially when you're like, well, why not me? Or why not, but I think it's just important to know that, especially in my industry, there's other things. You're not necessarily hearing no because you're not a good fit for their company, or you're not good at your job, or it's not necessarily no because of that. There might be a contract already in place. There might be another vendor that they're using that potentially expedites products, has their own freight, things like that. It really just depends.
That's a really good point. Kind of don't take it personally.
Yeah.
It might be something that's beyond your control or out of reach or out of sight, and they're not necessarily making it personal to you.
Correct. And I think that as long as people remember that, I think that try to be confident, try to believe in yourself, especially believe in yourself, because you know what you're capable of. And even when you don't, you'll surprise yourself more often than not.
I love that thought, that you can surprise yourself. And you do sometimes. You're like, oh, I didn't even know I had that in me.
Right. There's an old quote. I think it was from Coach Carter, maybe, but it said, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. And I remember that quote has always stuck with me, because I think sometimes we misplace our emotions and think maybe it's fear, but sometimes I think that it's actually just, that you are capable of so much. And once you take that first step and the ball's rolling, where is it going to stop? It's more of this fear of the unknown kind of thing.
Yeah. Oh, that's really a powerful statement. I love that you shared that, Savannah, because it really does make a difference. Like, maybe you're not scared of doing the thing. You're scared of how big it could get.
Because that demands more from you. And then, but I firmly believe that. And I believe that if I can do this, anybody can do this. Trust me.
Yeah. I like that too. It feels like, part of the reason that I made this podcast is to give people an example of, hey, she can do it. If she could do it, I bet you I could do it too.
Right. And I tell other people that, and I don't want them to think that I'm just saying things. I really do believe that. I think that I happen to fall into the right place at the right time. And I was able to have not necessarily oversight, but some great mentorship. And actually, there have been males that have really supported me and helped me, especially through the learning process. So I do think that we are getting somewhere, and I do want to take what I've learned and pass it down elsewhere. So like I said, hopefully somebody benefits from this information, and it might save them time and especially money.
Yeah. Maybe some of the mistakes along the way, they have a straighter path rather than more of a winding path. So if you could look back, if you could go back in time and talk to yourself at the beginning of your journey, talk to your 20-year-old self, is there anything you would want to tell her, you would want her to know?
I think I would say that true professional growth stems from an ability to blend self-compassion with honest critique, most likely. You're going to experience doubt, often more about your gender than your merit. And I think that if you use this as fuel to your fire, you can go many different places. Again, I cannot express the importance of networking. Network, from the time you're in college or the time you graduate high school, network. Even if you don't know necessarily what you're going to do, just make sure that you're aware of your behavior, and that you might meet that person down the road again. And so try to establish good relationships, healthy relationships, be patient with yourself, and just be aware that growth is filled with setbacks as well as victories. So not every day is going to be a step forward. Some days might be a few steps back, but as long as you keep moving,
learning through your experiences.
Right. Absolutely.
So when you're talking about networking, do you keep in touch with some of those that, I know that through your career path and your journey, you go, sometimes this particular network or group of people is more important. And then you move on and another group is more important. Do you keep those contacts from before, and how?
Yes. So business cards are super important. Okay. So I try to have business cards available. It's definitely available for any of the industry related events, especially reverse trade shows, the ABC events, that kind of thing. Business cards. Usually, because this industry is so tight knit and there's so few women. I run into those women often, even if we're not necessarily attending the same event as before. There's usually in my area a little group that I'll see out. And it would be unrealistic to expect to be able to make every networking event because there are so many. So that goes back to the work-life balance. I just think that if you hear about one and it's supposed to be like, let's say it's your refinery putting it on, you find out who's going to be there, is that person, because make sure the person that is ordering is the person that you're visiting. That's the whole point. You want to make sure that your target audience is right. These people are going to be procurement, project managers, things like that. And especially for women-owned businesses, you might have to go through the diversity supplier department as well.
That's a really good point, to kind of look at who you're networking with and make your hours or your contacts kind of be productive.
Right. And that is actually, I think, what a lot of women in this industry experience is they'll have a contact for a customer that they would like to have an MSA with, but the contact is not necessarily the person that makes that decision. So they'll spend all this time, working on this person and not really knowing, well, actually it's someone else in their office. And that's it. And also there are so many departments within the same company. So you really have to check. I mean, there are multiple people capable of ordering. So you have to make sure you're exploring all your avenues, that who is in charge of what, and all of that you pretty much have to ask about.
Yeah, that communication piece is kind of key there. So Savannah, if you look back and to when you started down this road, did you have something that was particularly scary? And does it still scare you today? Or did you find a way to work through that?
I think that what was scary, if you would call it scary, maybe anxiety provoking, would probably be just that when you walk into a room and all eyes are on you, inevitably they will be, because, when everybody's sitting down at their desk and you walk in and just naturally look up, whatnot. I think that you need to establish a present and be confident in that. I think that a lot of times we doubt ourselves and that is scary, doubting yourself and not necessarily believing in yourself just because, what the whole idea is to sell a product to somebody because they believe that you believe that, it's the best thing. And so I think that what would be scary is really just the self-doubt that comes along with being in a male-dominated industry. And like I said, there are other disparities there. So I would probably also say what would have helped a little bit is probably working on my negotiation skills as well. That's something that has come up, and I'm not necessarily the most assertive person. I can be assertive, but so there would be a pricing strategy, but I wouldn't vocalize that because, I was intimidated in the beginning. So luckily I've kind of gotten used to it now and I feel comfortable speaking on the value of the product. But that requires a lot of self-education.
Is there a way to speed that process up? Is there a class you can take or a book you can read, or is it just you just have to go through it?
Look, I've read so many self-help books, especially with business, that I feel like I should, just be one big ball of joy and optimism all the time. But really, a lot of this I had to learn myself. There's things, every day that I have to do. I'm like, oh, I've never done this before. It's a learning experience. I will say that there are resources there to help women. And I want them to know that especially women business owners, there's organizations such as, like I said, WBENC, and that they issue your certification for women-owned businesses now that would be your national certification. And then of course you have the SBA for federal. And Texas has the historically underutilized business certification. There's all of these different certifications in place to work with different entities. And they offer resources as far as events. There's a big national women's conference coming up in Denver, I believe. And so things like that, really.
Yeah, that's a really good point. There are resources out there that you can be taken advantage of. You might have to do a little bit of digging to find.
Right. And I think that the certification process in itself is intimidating due to the paperwork requirement. But if you really sit down and look at it, it's usually just the information is the information that you had when you set up your company, your operating agreements, things like that. Of course, tax returns and whatnot. But when you're first in business, they do account for the fact that you might not have business tax returns and things. Just because you don't have the paperwork doesn't mean you shouldn't apply. There are, for instance, when I first applied for my woman business enterprise certification, I believe that they asked for meeting minutes. Well, I'm a single member LLC, so they had other paperwork that could be submitted on behalf of that.
That's good to think outside the box and probably ask people who have been through the process, hey, what did you do? Are there other options around this? Because sometimes you don't know.
Right. And there's companies that charge $1,500 to enter in all of your information, but it's information that you would have to provide otherwise. So you still have to provide this third party with the information. If you're going to do all the work, you might as well do it yourself. And that will save you money. And that's once you have it all for the first time, then you renew every year. The information is there. You only have to update it to stay in compliance. There is the option for them to compliance audit you at any time. But, so far I have not been audited other than the first time that they come out to your business and, they want to make sure that it is truly woman owned and operated. You have to hold the highest position at the company. You have to have an explanation of the requirements and responsibilities for your job, resumes for all of your employees, things like that.
That's so interesting and something definitely to look into, especially if you're a woman entrepreneur. So I'm sure the answer to this question is yes, but can you talk a little bit about any unique challenges you faced because you were a woman in this industry?
Of course. Definitely the pay, I would say. It is, wow. I think that the pay and probably just the gender bias, people assume that because you're a woman that you're delicate or emotional. And even if you are those things, that's not necessarily specific to women. And so I think that there's just this preconceived notion that you might be drama or all these things that are typically said about women. And so I feel like you have to work twice as hard to get half as much. And it shouldn't be that way. So
yeah, that's true. There is a sense of, I was interviewing one person who said that she was fired as soon as she had a kid or by a client, right? They didn't buy from her because they didn't feel like she would be showing up at 100%. And she's like, I always show up at 100%. So that bias or the way they look at you.
And that is so unfair.
So, Savannah, looking at your success, what is the thing that you are the most proud of?
I think I'm most proud of, or I know I'm most proud of, I guess, really just being in a position where I can promote diversity inclusion, where I can help others. Just because some aspects were hard for me doesn't mean it has to be hard for the next person. I think that this industry can be extremely rewarding. And really, I'm most proud of the fact that I encourage others. I try to stay motivating others to follow their dreams and address these gender disparities and, the inclusive work environment. I think engaging in the conversations about diversity and inclusion are really going to be critical in driving positive change within the industry and the world in general.
I think so too. How do you get past, there's a lot in our industry that are like, oh, it's so boring. Math is not my thing. Finance is not my thing. It's so boring. Why would I want to do that? So how do you do that in your industry? How do you inspire and encourage the diversity?
Okay, so one thing is I like to remind women that there are set-asides there for a reason, okay? So they should and can be utilized. And so I think it's important to know that the set-asides and what you're going into before you even enter the industry. You need to know that it pays to be in a situation where you're historically underrepresented when it comes to being a woman-owned business and leveraging that to benefit you. And so, for instance, one of the things that I always see when I'm scanning the federal bids is they'll have, for example, electrical work. That's something that is now electrical work, high voltage, things like that and so I opened another line of midstream. So we do midstream power and electric now, which is a union line company. And now, so we started offering electric, and because there's set aside for that, as well as the historically underutilized businesses, they're in touch with the cities. Like I have a current contract with the city. I won't say it with you, but it's a current contract with the city. And so I think it's just being aware of what the set aside is in the first place, what industry it's in. Pick an industry where where you're historically underrepresented, and really just the self-education to know where you have to go to bid what thing. Take advantage of it. Take advantage of what's there. These things are there for women to utilize.
I like that idea that, look for the opportunities because of your underrepresentation. Look for the golden, the opportunities there that you can take.
Right. And that's part of the business planning portion anyway, because you obviously want to make sure that you're not in an oversaturated market. And then on top of that, being a woman, and, if it's male dominated and you're a woman and it's oversaturated, there are going to be more difficulties.
So if you had a young woman just coming to you right now and she's starting down this journey that you're already, over halfway down, what advice would you give her to help her be successful like you are?
The advice that I would give is that whenever you're growing, whenever there's growth of any sort, it's going to be uncomfortable. So just because you're scared doesn't mean that your intuition is playing against you. Doesn't mean that, that it's bad. that what's coming in the future is bad. It just means that, growth is uncomfortable. You're going to have a lot of self-awareness and a lot of serious conversations. There's going to have to be sacrifices. And really, you're going to have to, I guess, assess where you want your future to go and how your life right now affects that. And I've heard people say, imagine the life that you want to live and then say no to everything but that helps you get there.
That's a really good idea, to the extraneous things that aren't on your path or shouldn't be on your path or should not be a side path that you take, to learn to keep your eye on the prize and keep going forward.
Right. And also, like I said, I go back to outsourcing, but I really do believe that is, if people incorporated that more, then the burnout wouldn't be so real. And that is something, I didn't have all the resources that I have now back when I first started. This has obviously been a learning experience. So now I know where to outsource. Now I know what to do, how to cut costs while still, getting the benefits of, like, let's say a bookkeeper and things like that. And so I think it can be much more affordable than people would think. And so I definitely hope people, they list their options. They know that options are available and they're out there, and do not, if you go to get financing, do not go, be aware of what you're signing and the interest rate and how long you have to pay it back. Things like that. The SBA has loans for startup businesses for women. And I believe they have multiple different loans because they have, I think, 7A, and then they have the short-term loan as well. And sure, they'll be in your business, but their loan is, from what I understand, low interest and long-term, 10 years. So that's something to definitely consider as a female entering this industry, that there are resources available for them to use just for them.
Yeah. That's a good reminder to look and see what's available out there that might benefit you. So thank you, Savannah, so much for your time today. I really appreciate you being on with me and answering these questions and being so helpful. If I have a listener that wants to talk more or learn more about you, where would they go?
They can always reach out to me on LinkedIn. It's Savannah Rose, or feel free to email me at any time with questions regarding the certification process, or, if you just want to chat, have some questions of your own. My email is Savannah, just SAVANNAH @midstreammat.com.
Well, thank you so much for giving us this time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.